I believe Marco Antonio Barrera is the best featherweight in the world.
You talk about a finisher. There's a guy that can get you out of there, and he's in with a tough goes down, and I think they're going to stop it.
Marco Antonio Barrera had one of the rarest backstories in all of boxing. He was born in a stable, affluent middle-class family. His father was a successful businessman in the teeming capital of Mexico City. He hoped that one day his son would take over the family business. Marco showed talent in many areas. Marco spent his mornings studying and his evenings sparring. Marco had one foot in each world. He turns pro at 15. While studying law, Marco was also mauling 7 men a year. While Marco had his whole life to study, he only had a short time to win a title. He was a balanced pressure fighter who never got outside of himself. Every punch he threw was on balance and on target, and had something behind it. He wore his face like an expressionless death mask. His words rarely got above a whisper. They called the middle-class kid from Mexico City the baby-faced assassin.
Baby-faced assassin Marco Antonio Barrera.
When Marco needed to say something, he was talking with his hands. Even at the press conferences, Marco would shut you up if you said something he felt required a response. A right hand is his universal sign language. Kennedy McKinney would come to understand.
Tonight is really all about is to find out if Barrera is as good as many people think he is, and that would be very, very good.
He first hit it big on HBO's debut episode of Boxing After Dark.
There it is. Missed.
There you go.
Marco fought his unbalanced pressure style, and Kennedy fought to keep him at range. While Kennedy was hunting an elusive head, Marco was using a mixed attack with the liver as the main course. The fight had its first of several moments of greatness at the end of the fourth.
This is about as good as it gets.
It boiled over again in the sixth as Marco chased a dangerous McKinney from one side of the ring to the other.
This is a war. This is just a war, Roy.
Good hit about McKinney to get his back off the rope.
Marco threw more than 110 punches under 3 minutes.
Hit him once. Oh, but see, he can't get caught back.
Down goes Kennedy. Barrera is known as a great finisher.
Kennedy fought his heart out, even coming back to knock Marco down. Marco would have his revenge.
Oh, tremendous left hand in his corner. Watches with their hearts and their throats as he goes in and starts taking chances to throw.
McKinney's a weak fighter now. Barrera knows it.
And that's it.
It was a brutal way to step into the spotlight. Marco further solidified his reputation in a pair of desperate and dirty wars against Junior Jones. It took under a minute for the first rapid punch to land.
The more trouble Junior will be in. He said he wanted to get Barrera's attention early with some
His way with Barrera.
probably Marco Antonio's bread and butter.
By the second, they were throwing as many dirty punches as clean ones.
As they get into close quarters and exchange.
Aside from a full-blown exchange of rapid punches, Marco's left hook was straying below the belt.
Oh, another low blow.
Jones' corner will try to do something about it. Right hand by Jones and the left hook in there.
It was another war of Marco's own making.
Left hands. Hard right hand by Junior Jones.
They began with a bad headbutt, that drew blood before another long exchange of illegal rabbit punches the ref had to wrestle apart. Another headbutt saw Marco bleed before he walked onto a lethal right hand.
Trickling into Barrera's left eye. New urgency for the unbeaten Mexican. Down he goes. Hard right hand by Junior. More time than he deserved.
Why did he get so much time to survive?
More time than he deserved. But it's gonna
As Jones flurried to finish, Marco's corner jumped in to stop it. It was his first loss in 43 fights.
Has the referee stopped the fight?
Marco was intent on revenge and sought an immediate rematch.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission got a big quarter.
Once again, Marco gets hit with a rabbit punch just over a minute into a fight which would remain consistently dirty throughout.
36 Jones threw 7-9, and that may be the reason that Harold Letterman, as you saw, scored the Junior Jones.
Very smart fight out of there.
Junior here in round number 2. Accentuates the round with another hard left hook to the body. And then
The fight was dead even, with bad intentions on both sides.
Junior's right hand. First take away the jab. Professional performance. 4 rounds by Barrera. Jones. Barrera coming back to the...
That was a bad low blow.
In the ninth, Mills Lane takes a point for Marco for a punch that straddles the southern border.
Taking a point away from him right here. Time, and I don't know if the fight was close
I've
before.
never seen him try to push the issue so hard to want to fight.
Strong in the second half of the bout against Marco Antonio.
Jones was throwing more, but Marco's accuracy and efficiency were keeping it a dead heat.
Barrera working.
Got by either fighter.
He hurt Junior with that one body shot.
Oh, that was a good one.
When the cards are read, the questionable low blow cost Marco at least one scorecard.
Poison Junior Jones.
While he didn't get the win, Marco earned a reputation for retaliation. Across the pond was a superstar. His name alone sold out arenas. He was a generational puncher and an outrageous athlete. A freak who fought using one of the most remarkably bizarre styles in all the history of the sport. Worst of all, Nassem Hamed was well aware of how good he was.
My punching power is extraordinary. It's a gift from God, and you can't beat a gift, basically.
The only thing capable of matching his ability was his arrogance. The little prince found if his abilities did have a limit, it would come down to royal prerogative. He had a gift from God in either hand, like Moses' commandments. He could sit down on a straight shot with either hand, from either stance, and leave you looking for your mouthpiece.
Right in front of me, and I can honestly tell him that I'm going to knock his spark out. I'm going to knock his spark out.
And a hard left. And Kelly's down for the 3rd time.
But it was his leaping ability that Hamed built his castle on. Hamed's feet fought in fast forward. On one hand, it made him near impossible to predict.
I think they expected an explosion here after these last two.
On the left ear screen has been...
He loved to dip his head low and leap out with a wild lead uppercut that started from the floor and finished just short of the front row. Most could see it coming, leaned off to get away, only to find the prince's leap had put him in range and on an angle for a straight left. Either had the power to knock you out. The prince fought with his hands down as a stylistic choice. He had the reflexes to pull from punches, even while boxing enthusiasts grumbled about the technique catching up to him eventually. The prince pulled it off for years at a very high level. His head was always open, and he knew it. It was his thunder thighs and uncanny balance that carried him to safety. His head was generally long gone, when the punch arrived. Even if you caught up to him, then caught him, the prince had a sizable appetite for eating punches. Found a war to be good sport. But even that can convey the sense of spectacle. Though the prince wasn't king, he was incredible for promotion. He entered every boxing ring with a front flip over the rope, but only after a several-minute one-man dance routine, accompanied by everything from pyro to palanquins. Even the press conferences were worth watching, if only for his deeply punchable overconfidence.
I'm a complete package. Style is there.
He was growing increasingly outspoken about Islam,
Soon come, inshallah, later.
while going ham on the halal vices in his private life. The prince lived inside his own palatial ego. A documentary crew followed the prince as he prepared to face Marco. The film featured a grand total of 30 seconds of Marco. He trained in a public gym at high elevation. Marco had no focus but regicide, said nothing but Allah won't help you in the ring that night. While Hamed was playing out his own personal episode of MTV Cribs and making diva demands. Hamed split with his original trainer after a financial dispute, but he spent his time haggling over every detail of his entrance.
You'll decide that question right now. There's going to be a squabble later. Now, is 4 minutes reasonable?
Haggling with Michael Buffer over a statement he prepared before the fight. Haggling over gloves. He seemed more concerned about almost anything aside from getting in a multi-million-dollar fist fight with a dead-eyed Mexican champion. The first warning sign to fans was the prince foregoing his signature front flip.
Wow! No flip over the top rope.
He spoke his prepared statement, with all the pageantry at an end.
Allah is the greatest.
The prince began the arduous process of getting his gigantic ego fed to him by a true professional. The prince still had his gifts, but the royal was in with a different class. The prince looked planted as Marco jabbed, and did his duty with body work, using it to open up his left hook upstairs. Hamed never had any qualms about fighting dirty. He just wasn't used to somebody firing back dirty with such thoughtless reflex. The fight was close, each man taking his share of the early rounds. Marco's face never changed from its wood-carved expression, despite the blood trickling from his nose. The prince could play and punch, but settled for one shot at a time. Marco simply worked the textbook and took over the second half. Marco took the textbook the prince tore up and fed it to him one page and punch at a time.
Throw the left hand, but he hasn't thrown anything with it to get it done here. Barrera covering up. Barrera's playing possum. I don't think he's ever been hurt in a fight, but when he gets hit, his head is off the ball. You were concerned about last fight. Laz has got to try to land a big knockout punch against him. Laz will not come back with any shot.
In the final round, Marco clearly had enough of his opponent's royal antics and finally showed the prince the limit of his ability. The corner pad may as well have been an opening for a guillotine. The ref took a point. Hamed tried to touch gloves, Marco was far too focused on taking off his head.
Antonio Barrera.
It was a terrible night for the monarchy. For the rest of the world, it was a catharsis and a cautionary tale the boxing heads had heard 1,000 times before. Too much confidence can be just as harmful as none at all.